All right, guys, in this video, we're gonna finally wrap up this hallway. If you've been following along with any of my other videos, you know that first I did my laundry room over here. Then I did this arched pocket door. And then finally, I did this door to match. Now those look great, but obviously this hallway overall doesn't look great. So what I need to do is kind of the boring stuff first. I need to finish the drywall. So I've got some drywall, you can't see it, but it's not finished, so I need to do that. Then I need to fill and sand all of it. But then I've only got one light right here, and it's pretty dim in this hallway. I've got lighting set up for recording this video, but without the lighting I have set up, it's pretty dim in here. So what I want to do is actually remove this center pot light and then put one centered over each door, because I think that would look kind of good and intentional if there was a light centered over each of the doors. However, my ceiling has popcorn ceiling. I hate it, my wife hates it. So it's probably my first step. Get rid of the popcorn ceiling, fix the drywall, replace the lights, and then finally I can get onto the fun part, which is going to be making the trim that goes around both of these doors. And then finally after that, I think I'm going to do some wainscoting between, but I can't really do that until I figure out the width of the trim. Let's go. All right, it's time for the super fun job of scraping all this popcorn off the ceiling. I got some grief in videos I've posted before showing this process because of asbestos exposure. Luckily, my house was built in the early 2000s. Asbestos stopped being used in roughly the 80s. It'd be the safest for you to wear a respirator regardless, but first I'm spraying it with water, so there's not gonna be dust everywhere, and then it doesn't have asbestos in it. I'm not too concerned with it. Safety first, wear a respirator and eye protection if you want to. I'm not a DIY channel. I'm a, hey, look at what I'm doing channel, to be honest, or at least that's how I see myself. Don't listen to me, don't take my advice on how to do stuff. Maybe with woodworking, not really with anything else. The other thing to be aware of, this is gonna scrape off pretty easy once I get it wet. Might not be the case for you. You might watch this and think that looks pretty easy, I could do it. Here's the problem, mine hasn't been painted over. If yours has been painted over, it's not gonna come off easy at all. But if there's no paint over it, it actually comes off very easy. So I'll show you. I do small spots. Some people use really big sprayers, like fill up one of those things you'd use for spraying weed killer in the lawn, and they use that. This is what I have. I don't mind using it. I'm gonna let it sit for a second, and then it'll be pretty clear if I waited long enough, because it's gonna scrape off really easy. There you have it. All right, well, that handles the ceilings. They're not perfect, but I got them pretty close. I'm gonna have to do a skim coat and then sand that down before we put paint on. I also didn't bother getting too good towards the wall because I'm putting on that big fancy Victorian crown molding, so it doesn't really matter if I get that part perfect either. Onto this guy. So he's going away. I'm getting rid of this. And then I'm gonna replace it with two. So I'll have two lights. I'll have one centered over this door and one centered over that door. Should give me a lot better lighting in here. And also I think it'll just look better. All right, these should be wired up correctly now, and it should be a pretty drastic improvement because that one light before kind of sucked and didn't do much. So, Alexa, turn on the hall. A little off with the timing, but it works. All right, now I gotta plug this hole. So that shouldn't be too hard. I'm not good at drywall, so it's probably gonna take like 3 coats before it looks any good, but whatever. Plug the hole up, get drywall on the wall where it's missing. So I got distracted by a cat. Fix the seams, tape the seams and mud the seams is what I mean. And then into the wood shop. And we're gonna make trim to go around the doors. Let's go. All right, my first coat of drywall mud is drying. Don't look at it, it's horrible. I don't know what I'm doing with drywall. Luckily, with mud like this, normally just more coats, if you suck at it like I do, eventually it'll look good, so that's what I'm going for. But while it's drying, I can start working on the trim for this door. And at first that sounded like a really easy thing to do, but the more I think about it, I think there's some stuff I kind of need to think about. I don't know if this is a perfect circle. And frankly, it's probably not a perfect circle. I used a circle jig to make the form that I then used to make this piece, but it has spring back, meaning when you release the clamps, the pieces spring back out a little bit. If I was smart, I would have used the same exact diameter for the mold that I made, or the clamp, as well as the spacing between the two studs that I have here for the door. I don't know. Either way, I think when I put it in here, it kind of sprung it in, and this isn't a perfect circle anymore. So what that means is I can't just use a circle jig to make the trim that's gonna go around this. I want it to leave a 1/4 inch reveal. Maybe I got lucky and it will work. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna first go cut out a 3-inch wide trim piece out of plywood or MDF using a circle jig. If I bring it in, it like perfectly fits on here, then awesome. I just don't think it's going to. I think what I'm gonna have to do is probably trace this out to get a template and then use that template to make the walnut trim. Makes life harder, but I don't just wanna assume that the circle jig would work and then waste time and walnut. So let's go make a test piece right now out of plywood. Coming back in, hope it works. Okay, so let's talk about the plan. Where I started is I measured the width of the door, so the diameter essentially of the circle that I'll need to cut in order to leave a 1/4 inch reveal of the trim inside of that doorway. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set up my circle jig here to cut that diameter, being, you know, a 1/4 inch inside the trim on both sides. So it ended up being 32 inches, which means 16 inch for the radius. I don't always trust these though, right? The numbers on here, super nice, super useful, but what doesn't lie are layout lines. Gotta grab my pencil. I'm back. So I've marked with an X where I'm gonna start my circle from, the center point of my circle, and then I'm gonna measure 16 inches from it. So I'm gonna go from my center line, from that center point, 16 inches, make a mark. That's the top of my circle. While this jig does have numbers on it, your layout line's not gonna lie. So I know that I need to be on this side of that line. I'm gonna set this thing up and then I'm gonna look at the actual bit itself and make sure that bit is falling perfectly on the line that I care about and not really trust the numbers on this thing. This should lock into the base. I like to use a plunge router for something like this. So if you're not familiar, there's this little arm right here. I can lift that and then plunge it. That way it allows me to get my piece lined up like right where I want to line it up, and I don't have to like tilt it in. I can line it up where I want, see the blade's gonna hit correctly, flip, plunge. And then you can also control how much it plunges. So you can set 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch, however much you want, incrementally to drop down into your piece. So this circle jig comes with this guy. It's got a screw in it. So I'm just gonna line that up right in the center of the mark I made. Screw it in, not going anywhere. All right, so you can see my circle jig is locked into the router with this anchor point here. So what that lets me do is rotate this around that fixed position to get a perfect circle. Now what I want to do, here's the mark I made, that little guy. I am going to adjust this piece until the bit is falling perfectly on the line that I made. I've got the bit right on that line. So while you could adjust the numbers on that machine or on the jig and maybe they're accurate, I like this method. I just like this method more, that's all. All right, so this is really thin material, but I'm still going to go ahead and do this in 2 passes. This is 1/4 inch material. I'm gonna do it 1/8 inch at a time. So I'm gonna set my plunge depth accordingly here. All right, here's hoping this works. Not bad. It's not bad, babe. What? Oh, the thing I made actually kind of works. Okay, so here's the plan. I've got this guy. Let's see if I can get it to focus here. So I've got this guy because I want like a sort of a beaded look. So this guy is gonna provide the beaded sort of like seam on the inside of the piece. And then to follow that up, just a normal round over bit on the outside. All right, so here's after the first pass, so you can kind of see what I'm going for with this. The way I accomplished it is I've got this 3/16 roundover bit here, but it's like a spade point. I don't know what the actual name is. And how I set it up is, since it's a 3/16 roundover, I took my ruler, I set up the tip of that point 3/16 of an inch away from the fence. Now to finish the profile that I'm going for on this piece, I'm going to grab this 3/16 roundover bit and do the outsides. Hopefully that makes sense. Time to swap them out. All right, so I made 2 samples of like the trim profile I want to use. This 3-inch is the exact size that would fit over here. I was throwing around the idea of doing a chunkier, like 4-inch trim, but I would have to essentially cut off a part of it for when it loops around and comes over here, because otherwise it's, you know, it's too big in that area. So after thinking about it for a while, I also asked TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, and pretty much everyone said the same thing. Go with the 3-inch trim. So that's what I'm gonna do. So it's time to make trim. For these, the vertical parts, it's really easy. I just remake this but longer. They're straight, so easy. The curved part though, gonna be harder. Everything's harder since I made these doors curved. There's you know, a lot of pieces I have to make that are curved. I'm not gonna do a bent lamination like before with the form. I'm just going to keep the end grain vertical here and then cut it out. Think like a big sheet of plywood and then you cut a circle out of it. I'm gonna do that, but with solid walnut. So I'm gonna have to glue that up, mill wood, glue it up, and then cut the curve out, and then add these details that I did here for the beading. I think it looks pretty nice. So yeah, that's the next step. Let's go do it. All right, now it's time to I'm gonna make this arch portion of the trim first. The nice thing is that since I have this template, I can use this to exactly figure out basically how much wood I need, how much walnut I need to glue together to then cut this shape out. So I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna line up just pieces of wood, all with the grain running vertically, glue them together, and then once it's dried, I can do the same exact technique I did here to cut this shape out. If that doesn't make sense, then watch the video, because I'm gonna do it for you. Before I can cut the trim out, I need to glue all these pieces together, because, you know, I just laid them out so far, they're not glued together. So while I was doing it, I wrote a number on each one, and then I even traced the arch onto it so I don't forget which one is which. I also did my best to match grain up so that it looks as close as one continuous piece as possible. You'll never get it perfect, but I think it is important to at least pay attention to, you know, the grain choice so you can make it look more, you know, cohesive and, you know, one big piece. Now I'd love to glue the whole thing together all at once, all 7 pieces, but in my experience that never really works very well. And if I get these off just a little bit, then I'll have to sand it to fix them. Then they won't be the same width anymore. Then the whole thing has to get sanded to the same, it just kind of compounding errors. So be patient. I'll glue these 2 together, these 2, those 2, those 2, and then bring them all together later. The Eagles are playing the Giants in about an hour, so I've got time to kill. Let's get these glued up and drying, and then I'll go enjoy some time watching football. Now we wait. All right, now I've got this glued up. I used my template that I know fits the door inside. Made sure that I could use this and get a full piece cut out. So I've got that ready to go. I've already milled all this down to 3/4 of an inch thickness. The only thing that's left before I actually start using my router to cut out this piece is 1, I'm gonna use double-sided tape to stick it to my work surface so it doesn't move. But 2, I'm gonna sand it. It's almost perfect, but there's a little bit of a difference between each piece. And you don't want to try to fix that after you've run the router over it, because you're going to have grooves and valleys and peaks that you have to even out. It's better to even it all out right now and then run the router over it. So let's do that. Like I said, double-sided tape first though. It's going to hold it in place while I sand it. It'll also hold it in place for the router. And for double-sided tape, I use carpet tape. I stole that from a bourbon moth video. It's thin. You get a lot of it. A lot of times when you buy double-sided tape, you don't really get that much. There's a ton of this because it's used for putting carpet down, and you know, carpeted areas are normally pretty big, so they give you a lot of tape, and it's pretty inexpensive. It also has really, really good hold to it. So I'll just apply some pressure. And I mean, that's not going anywhere. First thing we're gonna do is chuck in the detail bit to route out the groove that we want on this piece. All right, check it out. I got it. So as you see, there's some little, remnants here. I'm just gonna take a sander and knock those off. Should be real easy to get rid of that stuff. It's like paper thin. Then you can see I pulled it off the table. So I'm not gonna use the circle jig to do the outside roundover because that bit has a bearing. I couldn't get the router bit in there because the extra pieces glued to the table for support were in the way. I could have removed those pieces, but then I think the whole thing would be wobbly. I think I have a much better bet of keeping this still and stable over here on my large router table. So that's how I'm gonna do it. Put it on the table, run it around. The bit should work just fine. I've already got the long pieces made. So I've gotta cut this perfectly flat across. I'll use my track saw for that. That way I know that both planes are like perfectly in line with each other. Then I've gotta make the long pieces. They're cut out to size, but I've gotta put the detail in them. For that, that's why I did this first, because it's gonna be easier to match this profile over on the table, because I can just do test pieces, where this would be a lot harder because of the router jig situation. It'd be a lot harder to make this match those vertical pieces. So yeah, that's why I do it that way. Do those next, sand it, get everything joined together, make sure it fits, and then finally put finish on it, and then we can go install it on the wall. That's a lie, we can't. I wanna paint the wall first, so I need to finish drywall, crown molding, spray the walls, then I'll put this on, because there's just a lot less risk of me getting paint on this if it's not even there when I do the painting. So you get the idea. Time to sand it. All right, let's talk about another oversight, another mistake I made. So I need these pieces to smoothly transition into these pieces. So what I should have done is cut this first and then cut this straight piece to width, because it's hard to dial in, the final dimension of this when I'm using a radius jig for it. However, I got lucky, and they match up nearly perfectly. Tiny bit of sanding and we'll be good. Maybe a 30-second off. I mean, not bad, guys. All right, I got that as close as I could. We do a test cut. I don't want to jinx myself, but this is working pretty well at this point. I was worried about matching up the two beads with the beads here, but they match up great. So what we're gonna do now, I wanna get this glued up and so I can let it dry overnight while I go to bed. So to attach them together, it's gonna make it big and a little cumbersome, but but I think I'll end up screwing some just like plywood brace pieces behind it so I can carry it all as one unit without worrying about it breaking. For now though, I'm going to just use pocket screws and glue to attach the vertical pieces to the circle here. So I'm just gonna add some pocket holes here, flip the whole thing over, screw it together, yeah, and then let it dry overnight. So let's do it. Nope. Woohoo! Hitting everything. I hate this part. I wish I wasn't doing this, but all the walls in my house are textured. They have a knockdown texture. I'll show you what that looks like. And because I had to redo all this drywall for these two doors, the walls aren't textured anymore because it's new drywall. So I could either retexture these walls, that's what I'm gonna do, or I could replace all the drywall in my house to get everything smooth. That sounds horrible, I'm not doing that. Or I could try skim coating all of the drywall in my house so that it's smooth, but that would require probably just as much work as just simply replacing all the drywall. Either way, it sounds horrible. So I'm gonna have textured walls. It is what it is. The knockdown texture is not the worst thing in the world. I don't hate it too much. Don't love it, but you know, it is what it is. So let's add texture to these walls. It's not the most DIY thing in the world, to be honest. They sell like a can, like a rattle can of texture. I've never had good luck with that. What I'm gonna do is use an air compressor and dilute some drywall mud to make it a little bit runnier. And then there's a big hopper you put on a gun with an air compressor and you spray it. You let it dry for about 10 minutes and then you come back with a trowel and you knock it down, hence the name knockdown texture. So you'll see me do that. I gotta mask off the crown. I don't wanna texture the crown, just the walls. So let's do that and then we can move on to finally, I think, painting things. The tub of drywall mud that I need is in here. I don't feel like taking that tape down, so we're gonna go to Home Depot. I don't know how many trips this is so far, it's a lot. Before I spray it, I need to make sure I've got the pattern right. You can see there's a bunch of options here. I'm going with a knockdown texture, which the manual says is number 5. So I'm gonna mix up some drywall, put it in here. I've got my air compressor set to 50 PSI, because that's what it told me to do in the manual. And then I've got some drywall here that I'm going to test my spray out. After I spray it, I'm gonna let it sit for, I think roughly 10 minutes is what worked last time I did this. And then I come back with a trowel and I knock it down. Let's give it a shot. That's more what I'm going for. It's time to finish one of the arches. That's annoying. Which is in the background, so I'm gonna move my fence here off the table saw, off to the side. I really like how this setup works. So if you're trying to figure out how to make a 2-car garage work best for you, this setup has been great. Having the table saw and the outfeed table come together to work as a workbench, because if I need more room, I can always just take my sled here and I can put it underneath my outfeed table. I set it up so that it would fit underneath there. And that gives me some extra room. I'm gonna wipe this off real quick, get rid of all the sawdust, and then we're gonna finish that arch. I'm doing it one at a time because I really don't have a good space to store them. So once one's done, I'll finish it, install it, come out, make the next one. Kind of forgot that there's a front and back to each door. So in my brain, I only had 2 arches to make, but you know, there's an inside and outside of the door. So I actually have 4 to make in total. I've only made 1 so far, but it's okay. Well, you know, slow and steady wins the race. Ah. Everything's fine.
Everything's fine.
Yep. Wait, you asked about the cats. What about me? And that finally wraps up these door projects. I'm super happy with how both of these turned out. What's next for us is we are going to move on to the bathroom. Not the bathroom door, but what's inside the bathroom. We're gonna do a full remodel in there. Gonna make it match kind of how this laundry room looks, because right now they don't match at all. So if you're interested in that, consider subscribing. Please like the video, leave a comment. Any of those things really, really help me out and I appreciate it a ton. But tune in next time as we tackle